I stood in the pharmacy line with a paper prescription in one hand and $23 in the other. The woman behind the counter told me the pills would be 38. I didn't argue. I nodded like I understood, folded the paper, and walked out. Outside, I stared at my grocery list. Bread, milk, something with protein. Nothing fancy. Nothing I didn't need. I remember sitting in the parking lot, calculating. If I skipped lunch every other day, maybe I could afford both the medication and the eggs. Maybe. But what if the price went up again next week? I used to plan meals. Now I plan compromises. And I know I'm not the only one. No one warns you that retirement might mean standing in front of a shelf, choosing between your heart medication and your dinner. This isn't some abstract headline. This is real. Right now. And for more of us than anyone wants to admit. If you think this sounds extreme, then good. It means you haven't had to make that choice yet. But some of us already have. And we make it quietly, every single week. You don't notice the shift right away. At first, it's just being more careful, checking prices, switching brands, waiting for sales. Then you start keeping receipts. Then you stop looking at them altogether. The day I realized something had changed, I was holding a calculator in my kitchen. Not for taxes, not for a budget, but to decide if I could afford eggs and my water pills in the same week. 1 dozen eggs, $5.19. Generic medication, $17.75. That left me with just under $20 for everything else. The worst part wasn't the math. It was knowing I'd have to do it all over again in 7 days, hoping the prices hadn't crept up again. Before, shopping was a routine. Now, it's a process of elimination. I walk into the store knowing I won't get everything. I carry 2 lists, what I need and what I'm willing to give up. Butter? Maybe not this time. Fresh fruit? Depends on the week. Toilet paper? Only if it's on sale. You don't say these things out loud. You just adapt. People around you load carts without thinking. You're watching the register, item by item, rehearsing what to ask them to remove if it goes over. I've stood there, smiling at the cashier, pretending I forgot something when I really couldn't afford it. Walked back to an aisle I didn't need, just to hide the fact that $20 doesn't stretch the way it used to. It's not just food. It's fuel to get to the doctor. It's the copay for the visit. It's vitamins your doctor says you should be taking if you have anything left after rent, utilities, and groceries. There are days I split prescriptions in half. Not because I misunderstand the instructions, because I understand exactly what I'm running out of. Some weeks I don't take the bus to avoid the fare. I walk instead, even when my knees ache, even when it's raining. That extra few dollars might mean I don't have to skip a meal. You start to plan fatigue like it's part of your schedule. You take fewer steps in the store. Skip aisles that hold things you can't afford. The world narrows without anyone seeing it. From the outside, it just looks like frugality. From the inside, it feels like being squeezed in silence. And you wonder quietly, always quietly, how long you'll be able to keep it up before something gives way. In the next part, I'll tell you what that pressure does over time and how the cost of surviving in 2025 goes far beyond what you see on the receipt. There's a price to staying alive, and in 2025, it's higher than it's ever been. Not just in dollars, but in energy, in dignity, in time spent deciding what to live without. Healthcare is the obvious drain, but it's not just the big emergencies or surgeries that crush you. It's the slow drip, the pills you take every day, the blood pressure tablets, the cholesterol meds, the arthritis painkillers, the refills that seem to cost a little more each month, even when the dosage doesn't change. I asked once why my medication was $11 more than last time. The woman at the counter shrugged. Manufacturer pricing, she said, like that explained everything. For me, $11 meant skipping meat for the week. It meant boiling rice, stretching beans, drinking tea instead of milk. Doctors often say, take it with food. But they don't ask what kind of food. They don't ask if you had breakfast. They don't know that some of us take pills with crackers and call it a meal. Insurance is another weight. Even with Medicare, there are holes, gaps that feel like traps if you're not careful. 1 month you're covered. The next, a new rule kicks in. Now that medicine you've been on for years isn't preferred, and you're told to either switch or pay full price. Generic alternatives aren't always cheaper. And even when they are, the savings can't fix the rest of the equation. When your total monthly income is less than what a city dweller pays in rent, saving $5 doesn't solve much. It's not only medicine. It's transportation to get to the pharmacy or the clinic. It's the rising price of food that's supposed to help you manage your condition. It's heat in the winter, fans in the summer, bottled water when the tap isn't safe. These aren't luxuries. They're what allow a person to remain stable. But in 2025, stability is expensive. The grocery store used to be a place where I felt in control. Pick the brand, the weight, the price that fits. Now, shelves carry choices I can't make. They mock me with value sizes I can't afford up front or deals that require apps I don't use. Last week, I stood in front of the yogurt fridge and realized I hadn't had dairy in a month. The last time I bought cheese, I made it last 3 weeks by slicing it paper thin. I count calories differently now. Not by what's healthy, by what's available. Even fresh fruit has started to feel like a treat. Bananas when they're cheap. Apples if I find a bag on clearance. Berries? That's for someone else. When people talk about inflation, they mention fuel, housing, and stocks. They talk about markets and interest rates. But no one stands next to me when I run the numbers to see if I can buy a rotisserie chicken and still afford to refill my prescription. They don't see the way your body adapts to hunger so quietly you forget what feeling full is like. Or how you skip meals not because you're not hungry, but because it makes the medicine last a little longer. Being sick is expensive. Staying alive is a calculation. And there's no line item on the receipt for how it wears you down. Next, I'll show you how that exhaustion becomes silence. Why so many of us never talk about it, even when it's the only thing on our minds. There's a difference between being poor and being visibly poor. Most of us do everything we can to avoid the second. We dress neat, keep our hair combed, say, "I'm fine," when someone asks how we're doing. Because admitting otherwise doesn't feel like relief. It feels like failure. I never told my daughter I'd stopped buying fresh vegetables. She would have insisted on helping. But the idea of taking from her, someone already raising kids and paying a mortgage, felt worse than going without. And so I said nothing. This is how the silence starts. Not because no one cares, but because you're tired of explaining, tired of reminding people that your version of normal keeps shrinking. There's a kind of pride that's hard to let go of. You've worked all your life, paid into the system, raised a family, handled things on your own. Then one day you're staring at a grocery receipt wondering which item put you over the edge, and the idea of asking for help feels heavier than the struggle itself. You don't want pity. You want autonomy. And when autonomy becomes unaffordable, you keep pretending it's still intact. The shame isn't about being poor. It's about slipping quietly beneath expectations, yours and everyone else's. People see your age and assume things are taken care of. Retirement must mean security. Medicare must mean coverage. Discounts must mean everything's easier now. But the discounts don't touch the copays. The coverage skips what you need most. And security only stretches as far as your ability to fake stability. So you learn to mask it. You find little ways to make ends not meet, but pass near each other without colliding. You go out less. You stop replacing things. You make do with what you have. You bring snacks to family gatherings not because it's easier, but because you don't want to show up empty-handed. You keep old clothes folded neat, ironed, washed, because wearing them longer is better than explaining why there's no new sweater this year. And when someone asks, "How are things?" you say, "Good, good." Then change the subject. Because saying, "I can't afford both dinner and medicine this week," is not something people know how to respond to. Even friends don't always understand. Conversations shift with age. People talk about health, but not the costs. About memory, but not about what they've quietly stopped doing because of money. The silence becomes routine. It's easier to stay quiet than to admit how close you are to the edge. There was a day I stood in line behind a man buying canned soup and crackers. He paid in change, slowly counting it out while the clerk avoided eye contact. I remember thinking, that could be me next month. But I didn't tell anyone. Even now, talking about it feels like breaking a rule. Like drawing attention to a crack in the foundation everyone wants to believe is solid. But cracks don't fix themselves. They spread. They take your voice with them if you let them. I didn't speak up because I was waiting for things to get worse. But worse came gradually, and silence made it easier for it to stay. Next, I'll tell you why so many of the systems meant to help aren't reaching the people who need them most, and what that looks like when you're the one falling through the cracks. There are programs. Assistance exists. But getting to it, qualifying, applying, navigating the requirements, feels like stepping into a system designed for someone else entirely. I once tried to apply for food assistance. Not because I wanted a handout, because I needed breathing room. They asked for printouts of every account I owned, proof of every dollar received in the last 90 days, letters explaining why certain deposits existed. When I hesitated, explained that some of it came from selling old tools, from a neighbor paying me back in cash, the woman at the counter just stared and repeated, "We'll need documentation." I left with nothing. Another time, a flyer showed up in the mail. "You may qualify for heating assistance this winter." It sounded simple. I called. The automated voice directed me through 7 options, each ending in a wait time. By the time I reached a real person, the deadline had passed. Most support isn't denied outright. It just becomes unreachable through delay, complexity, or quiet rejection. You need internet to fill out the forms. You need an email account. You need a scanner or a smartphone to upload documents. You need to remember 10 passwords, reset 3 of them, and not make a single mistake along the way. And if you do make a mistake, the system closes the page and tells you to start again. The irony is that many of us aren't asking for miracles. We're asking for margin. A little space to breathe when the car breaks down, when the rent increases, when the meds go full price because of a formulary change. Instead, we get a pile of PDFs and a promise to call us back. No one ever does. Some people are lucky. They have family who can help navigate the online forms, who know what words to say on the phone, who are willing to wait on hold for them. But for the rest of us, it becomes a quiet decision to stop trying. It's not bitterness. It's fatigue. You walk away not because you don't need help, but because the help feels like another job. And you already have one, keeping your life afloat with what little you have. In my neighborhood, there's a man who lives alone, about my age. He used to volunteer at the local pantry. Now I see him there as a guest. He told me he didn't apply for housing support because he didn't want to look desperate. When I asked if he'd ever tried again, he said, "Once was enough." That's what this kind of help looks like for many of us. Not relief, not stability, just another door that didn't open. What's missing isn't funding or flyers or promises. What's missing is trust. And trust disappears when people reach out and feel nothing on the other side. In the next part, I'll tell you what changed for me, not because I suddenly had more money, but because I stopped trying to survive in silence. The breakthrough didn't come from a government office or a check in the mail. It came from a conversation I didn't want to have. A neighbor knocked on my door one afternoon. She was holding a grocery bag, some bread, canned soup, a bag of apples. Said she had extras. I knew she didn't. I almost refused. But she didn't ask if I needed help. She just said, "I figured this would go to waste otherwise." That was the first time I accepted something without feeling like I had to apologize for existing. It changed the way I looked at asking. Not as weakness, but as honesty. I called my daughter the next week and told her the truth. Not all of it, not the worst days, but enough for her to understand why I hadn't been visiting, why I always said, "I'm fine," when I wasn't. She didn't scold. She listened. And then she asked what she could do, not out of pity, but because she finally knew what was really going on. We didn't fix everything overnight. But now she picks up an extra pack of fruit or vitamins when she shops. She helped me set reminders in my phone for prescription dates. She checked if there were local groups for seniors that could help, not big organizations, just people like me who'd had enough of staying quiet. One of them invited me to a food share event at the community center. It wasn't charity. Everyone brought something small. No forms, no questions, no proof of hardship. I walked in thinking I didn't belong. I walked out with enough for a week and 2 new names in my phone. Another neighbor told me about a clinic that did medication reviews. The nurse there suggested an alternate pharmacy that offered the same pills for less than half the price. No subscription, no app, no monthly fees, just someone who took 5 minutes to explain how the system worked. I started talking to people more after that. The clerk at the store, the man at the bus stop, a woman I met in line at the library. It wasn't dramatic, But each exchange reminded me that isolation wasn't inevitable, that I hadn't run out of options, just run out of ways to carry the weight alone. The money didn't change. The prices didn't drop. But something inside me did. I stopped waiting for someone else to make things easier. I stopped assuming no one would understand. Small conversations turned into shared rides, into tips about senior discounts no one advertises, into help applying for assistance I had given up on. I learned that control doesn't always look like fixing everything. Sometimes it's just refusing to vanish, refusing to let silence grow larger than your needs. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving again, still struggling, yes, but not drowning in it. In the next part, I'll tell you why staying visible matters and what one person can do to keep that from fading in someone else's life. I never thought staying alive would mean running the same math problem every week. Groceries or pills, pain relief or heating. It's a quiet crisis, one most people won't notice unless it's their reality too. But just because it's invisible doesn't mean it isn't everywhere. Some choices aren't choices at all. They're the last option when everything else has fallen away. No one should have to live like this. Not after decades of work. Not while politicians argue over numbers that don't feel real in checkout lines or pharmacy windows. If you know someone older, ask them what they're choosing between. Don't assume they're okay because they smile. Listen. And if this story feels familiar, if it sounds like your life, know that you're not alone. There are others walking the same line, quietly, every day. Say something. To a neighbor. To a family member. Even here, in the comments. One voice won't fix the system, but it might keep someone from disappearing inside it. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Someone needs to be.